Well, it's another year and another controversy involving Apple, and this time they're in hot water for supposedly purposefully slowing down older iPhones. Now, this has been suspected by a lot of people over the years, but some said, well, it's just because older phones can't run the newest software as well. But actually, it came out that Apple is indeed slowing down older iPhones, but not necessarily for the reason that you may be thinking. And they actually did apologize for this, and they're actually facing lawsuits as well for planned obsolescence, which is supposedly illegal in some countries like France. And that just means that they plan, allegedly, to make a phone obsolete after a certain amount of time, possibly forcing people to upgrade. Now, that's not apparently what they were doing, and we could get into that. And I do actually think this whole thing is overblown, so I'm going to defend Apple a little bit in this video and explain what they were doing. I'm not going to defend everything they did, but we can at least go over and see why they did what they did, and let's talk about that. Now, to understand the whole situation, you have to have a little bit of background, and that is basically about how batteries work in phones. So you need to know that they do degrade over time. They become less efficient depending on a lot of things, such as how long they've been in service, how many times they've been recharged, the temperature they've been used, a lot of stuff. But not only is it that a phone won't last as long, but also it'll not be able to deliver the same maximum amount of power at any given time. So if a processor needs maybe, say, 1 amp at a time, then an older battery, where it might have been able to deliver that 1 amp at the beginning, maybe now it can only do 0.5 amps. So it can't deliver the amount of power instantaneously that a processor might need as that battery ages. And how this is relevant to iPhones is that it turns out that the older batteries were sometimes actually causing the phone to shut down when the phone needed a certain amount of power and it wasn't able to deliver that. So it wasn't just that the batteries weren't lasting as long, but like I said, it wasn't able to literally give as much power as the phone needed, and then it would crash. So as a result of this, what Apple did, and this is the issue a lot of people are having, is that they actually introduced in iOS 10 a new function in the background, like background software that deals with power management. And what this does is reduces the maximum performance of some phones so that it wouldn't require that amount of energy from the battery, and therefore the phone wouldn't shut down. And if you're wondering, no, this is not just for really old phones, but even up to last year's phone, the iPhone 7, with the most recent update to iOS 11.2, they actually did introduce the same thing in iPhone 7, as well as the iPhone SE, the 6, the 6S, and all those. And you can actually look at some analysis that was done on these different phones by at least one service called Geekbench. They have some apps that analyze iPhone performance. And they looked at the different iPhone performances, and you would expect that each phone from Apple would have the same performance for each model. However, this was the case before the update that introduced this new feature, you could call it, but after, you can clearly see that there are additional peaks at lower performance levels, meaning that some of those phones were being limited to those lower performance levels, not the maximum that you would expect with the newer phone. And with the iPhone 6S, you can see that it started happening right after they introduced this thing at iOS 10.2.1, and it became even more pronounced with 11.2. Also with the iPhone 7, last year's model, it had the same peak for everyone, but after 11.2, this is when they introduced the throttling for some, and you can see the peaks at 11.2. And the only thing I'm kind of curious about is what else haven't they told us? Is the CPU performance the only thing they're limiting? Are they maybe limiting the screen brightness by a little bit, or the memory speed, or something like that? Because they didn't tell us about this until it was found out, and then they apologized afterwards. But there might be other stuff going on in the background that we don't even know about, and that's kind of sketchy. Now, all that being said, I do think this is quite overblown. Yeah, it's pretty sketchy that Apple didn't tell us that they were doing this, and I don't like that. But the fact that people are suing Apple, saying, oh, you're making us upgrade by slowing down older phones, I don't think that's true. And you can see that by the analysis done by Geekbench, it's clear that they weren't slowing down all phones. So it's pretty obvious that they were telling the truth, that they were doing this for a reason. And it seems evident that they were actually doing some analysis on each individual battery, that software, to determine whether it needed to be downgraded and slowed down or not. Because different phones did get reduced by certain amounts, and most phones did have the same performance as when they were new, the same top performance. Also, another reason why this is overblown is Apple had to do something. I mean, they can't have phones shutting down. It's better to slow down the phone than to have them shut down. That would be a way worse experience, and obviously people are gonna way more notice their phone not working at all if they're in the middle of a call, in the middle of doing something. That is infinitely worse than it just being a little bit slower. And also, with these phones that were slowed down, it's not like you would be missing anything, because presumably it will only reduce it so much so that the phone won't shut down. So it's not like you would ever get that higher speed anyway, because if it was to get up to that speed, it would draw too much power from the battery and therefore shut the phone down. So you have the choice of either getting the lower speed that allows you to never have your phone shut down, or risk it shutting down if you ever go above that speed, which would probably be most times with that older battery, and just more and more times as it gets older and older. But I do agree that Apple did not handle this well at all. First of all, what I think they should have done is from the beginning tell people what they're doing, make a notification at least that says, look, your battery is limiting the performance. If you were to have the higher performance, it would shut down your phone, all this sort of stuff, and maybe tell you, look, you gotta upgrade your battery or this phone's not gonna work anymore. So they should at least tell people they're doing that. The fact that they kept it a secret and actually lied and were actually saying, no, oh, we didn't do anything, it's just slowing down by itself, that is really scummy. And also, if these batteries are causing so much of a problem, I think that could be an issue that Apple could solve by simply adding bigger batteries. We know that Apple puts in tiny, tiny batteries into their phone, and yeah, the phones are very efficient, but look, if they are causing just 1-year-old phones to shut down, there is no reason a 1-year-old phone should have to be reduced in performance, because otherwise it would shut down. That is just bad engineering, and I'm assuming they could just do better by introducing bigger batteries that could handle larger loads over longer amounts of time. So come on, Apple, you're just doing this and you know how you could fix it, but instead you're keeping it a secret, you're limiting performance. It's not nice. That being said, at least after all this came out and Apple got a ton of crap for it, they are doing things to kind of remedy it, although after the fact. First of all, in an upcoming iOS update, it will actually tell people when their battery is below good health and whether it might be limiting system performance. So that's at least good. They should have been doing that from the beginning. And I don't know if it'll still be telling people that their performance is limited, but it'll at least tell you how your battery's doing. And also, they are, over the course of next year, I believe all of 2018, they will be lowering the price of battery replacements from $79 to $29. So that's not a bad deal. So if you have a iPhone 6 or later, you can get a brand new battery in your phone for just $29, and then it should run like new. Or at least if it doesn't run like new, it'll run at the maximum performance, and it'll last longer too, because batteries do degrade. There's no way around that. That happens with all phones. And by the way, this is the case even if the phone is out of warranty. So even if you don't have the Apple Care Plus, it's a really old phone. If it's a 6 and later, you can still get that really cheap upgrade for the battery. And honestly, based on what we saw with even 1-year-old phones kind of having this battery degradation, it might be worth it just at the end of the next year. If you have an iPhone 8 even, the most recent one like I have, then I'm probably gonna get that battery replacement just so I know that, you know, I can have the maximum performance for longer, because who knows? Next year they might introduce another software update that's gonna limit even the iPhone 8 or the iPhone X. You never know. And who knows if they're even gonna tell us. So that's the basic whole story of everything. If your phone's been slower, that could be why, especially if it was after one of these updates. Although it's not super malicious. People saying that, oh, Apple's purposefully slowing down phones so you have to upgrade, come on, don't be ridiculous. They wouldn't risk doing that. That would be the worst thing they could possibly do. I do not genuinely think that they are reducing phone speeds if they don't have to, and they're doing that at an individual phone level, and we could see that by the different graphs showing that different phones were reduced by different amounts, and that would be probably the minimum they had to reduce it. So you can let me know what you think down in the comments. If you think Apple is just the devil for doing this, if you're siding with them, we can all talk about that down there. If you want to keep watching, I'll put some other videos right here. You can just click on those. And if you want to subscribe, I make new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Should be worth it. And also enable notifications by clicking that bell, or YouTube literally might not even show you new videos, even if you do subscribe. Keep that in mind. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Have a good one.